Well, Tom, what can you tell us about the agreement that apparently was reached yesterday at the United Nations?
Well, there was an agreement yesterday among the participants to support this resolution, which continues the effort, the process of negotiating an arms trade treaty. And yesterday, with one exception, all the major players seemed to reach an agreement that they would go ahead with this. The major player that abstained was Russia. Interestingly enough, now before the Obama administration came in, the United States was opposed to the arms trade treaty process. But now with the Obama administration, the United States has turned around. There is a kind of a wrinkle to that, though, because one of the provisions of the resolution is that any negotiations have to be done on what we call a consensus basis. In other words, everybody has to agree to everything. And that was a kind of the debate that was held today. They adopted the resolution today at about 1 o'clock. And that was part of the discussion today, was whether or not this was a good or bad thing.
And so what do they ultimately decide? Will this treaty process take place under the rules of consensus?
Yes, it will under this resolution, but they're looking at a 3-year process, which means that there's two more General Assemblies are going to meet before the actual conference is held in 2012. So the rules can always change, but at this time the rule is consensus, which essentially gives the United States a veto.
Okay, and it's interesting that in some of these organizational meetings that have been taking part throughout this very long and drawn-out process, they had been operating under consensus for quite some time. But I recall at one of the NGO meetings not too long ago, there was a resolution that was adopted, and they decided to forego consensus. So is this good news or bad news for gun owners, Tom?
Well, the idea of consensus is good news for gun owners, because that means the United States has a veto in any treaty. Now, that assumes that the current administration still protects the interests of gun owners, but I mean that's some politics down the line. You're talking about what happened in 2008. They had what's called a biennial meeting of states, where they actually voted for the first time in about 10 years on one of these proposals. I won't go into the technicalities, but that did set a precedent of voting. So there's always that possibility of voting, and the United States is almost always outvoted on these issues.
Okay. Now, the resolution that was adopted today, does it get into any specifics about what the United Nations is hoping to accomplish with this arms trade treaty? I know that they keep telling us that gun owners don't have anything to worry about, but when you've got people like Rebecca Peters, using every opportunity they can to talk about the need to restrict the arms for civilians, even here in the United States. I don't think there are a lot of gun owners who are comforted by these promises by the United Nations.
Well, you make a very good point, because the NGOs look upon this as a vehicle for their anti-gun agenda. The resolution, as it passed, had a consensus provision in it, and then it also had a provision acknowledging constitutional protections. That was some more United States language. But we also have to look beyond just our own borders, in the sense that this treaty could also affect any international commerce in firearms, i.e. what could be imported, what could be exported. And then I'd have to take a much broader view and say that this treaty could also affect gun owners throughout the world. And there are a lot of other gun owners throughout the world, and I work with them. So I'm very concerned about that and how it's going to affect our brothers and sisters in Australia or South Africa or Italy or France or any place else where there are a lot of hunters.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, because it seems like, based on what we've been seeing, you've got the president of South Africa, Zuma, saying that he thinks that it is perhaps time for civilian ownership of firearms to go away. And I know that he's drawing a great deal of criticism for the comments that he made recently in South Africa. But, there are a lot of nations out there that it seems like their leaders would be perfectly happy to see civilian ownership of firearms banned.
Cam, you're right. And one of the things that's so interesting when you work internationally, and that is how different we are in the sense that even Americans who we might consider liberal would be considered not liberal by some very, very radical governments. I don't want to get into so much of specifics, but we are the bastion of gun rights, and some of the things that our brothers and sisters in other jurisdictions have to put up with, we would never put up with. You pointed out the situation in South Africa, and I follow that situation very closely. We have a organization in South Africa. It's what I would consider a sister organization, South African Gun Owners Association. And they are doing a tremendous job down there of defending, trying to defend gun rights. But it's a hard road to hoe, as used to say on the farm.
Absolutely. So what's the next step, Tom? What happens next?
Well, there will be a lot of what we call bilateral meetings. There's going to be a seminar in Vienna to discuss the treaty. This will be NGOs will participate and governments will participate. We will be there. And then this summer, there will be a 2-week negotiation session in July in New York. And then there'll be another resolution next fall. And then there'll be 2 weeks of negotiations in 2011. Then in 2012, there'll be a 3-day preparatory committee meeting in the winter. And then sometime in either the spring or the summer of 2012, there'll be a 4-week conference to draft the final version of this treaty. So it's kind of the witch's Sabbath for international gun control.
All right. Well, Tom Mason,
if I can use a metaphor on Halloween.
Absolutely. And I hope that what comes out is not too scary for gun owners. But we're going to continue following this as we have throughout the entire process. And Tom Mason, thank you again, sir, for coming on the program today.
Thanks a lot, Cam.